Apple has laid out its plans at WWDC.
It's all about the software, but why? Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm here with a man whose battery life isn't what it used to be, Alex Kidman. Alex, what's been happening in tech news?
Optus has joined Telstra in offering data sharing across SIMs on its plans. The difference between Telstra and Optus in this case is that while Telstra will still slug you $10 a month for the privilege, Optus is only charging $5 per SIM as a one-off fee.
Apple has coughed up $3 billion for Dr. Dre's Beats Electronics, purveyor of high-end headphones and streaming audio. Beats has since shut down its MOG subscription music service, although Telstra claims that it's business as usual for Australian MOG users.
Microsoft's announced Skype Translate, a mechanical real-time translation service for Skype that it hopes to launch in beta form by the end of the year. Accurate mechanical translation remains a real holy grail for languages, largely because, well, machines are basically better at counting and, in the future, herding us all into massive slave camps.
Google's tiny Chromecast media player has finally made it to Australia, selling online and in stores for the expected $49. Local video services Presto, QuickFlix and iView aim to soon support the Chromecast. It's also possible to get Netflix running on a Chromecast in Australia, although the workaround is rather more complicated than it is for most home entertainment devices. So Alex, Apple's just held its keynote for its Worldwide Developer Conference, WWDC. What big steps have Apple taken here?
Well, Apple's developer conference is, as the name suggests, a conference for developers, but it's often used the keynote to also announce new products and services.
Yeah.
Just before, as is the case with any Apple event, of course, the rumour mills were running wild with tales of iWatches and iPhone 6s and split-screen iPads and every crazy idea under the sun. As it turns out, Apple's gone with a really software-heavy strategy, introducing the next version of its OS operating system for its Mac computers and the next version of iOS 8 for its mobile devices, and nothing else at all. All of its hype has really been focused around these two software packages, and especially on how they'll work together. This has long been something that Apple has strived towards, and that's no big surprise to people. It wants to keep them within its user base.
Apple seems absolutely determined to turn Macs into iPads, whether or not that's what Mac users want. It looks like they've gone even further down that path this time.
Oh, definitely. I mean, both visually, because the next version of OS X, the Yosemite, they're now named after California landmarks, has
not
a very
characters.
Not cartoon characters, and no longer big cats, which makes me sad. But the visual look of it is very much more that kind of slightly candy-coloured iOS thing. The icons are flattened, there's transparency, and there's lots and lots of cross-compatible services, up to and including a thing they're calling continuity, which will theoretically allow you to be working on a document or an email or whatever on your iPhone and flick it straight over to an iMac or to a MacBook.
But we can kind of do that now. The one thing that caught my eye is they're actually trying to catch up with things like Dropbox by turning iCloud into a proper file sharing service rather than just an iWork file sharing service.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's been long coming and frankly is a bit long overdue. There's a fair bit here. There's a fair bit here which is quite welcome for the platform, but which is not quite as unique as Apple might want to make out.
Never say it's not true. Apple would never do such a thing.
It is Dropbox or any of a number of other online storage services, because it'll just be a folder in your Finder window. But they've got a predictive text keyboard, which
revolutionary.
Were BlackBerry's basically bankrupt, they'd probably sue them for.
Yeah. And you can change the keyboard. Who's ever heard of being able to do that on a smartphone?
Well, this is one of the other interesting things that they've done. They've gone down a kind of slightly more open, especially for Apple, actually massively more open in a way, road in terms of the way that they want developers to work with their software. Because they've said, look, third-party keyboards, they can be a thing, although I'll be really interested to see how far you can take a third-party keyboard. Whether or not, for example, you can use a swipe-style keyboard, and there will be swipe for iOS, within the Mail app, for example, or if it's just a case of, no, a developer can specify a keyboard. I'm not entirely clear on that at this point in time.
Yeah.
But they've opened up the API for Touch ID, for example. They're suggesting alternate search engines, including DuckDuckGo, which is excellent if you're really kind of privacy-minded. Now, this is slightly open for consumers, which is quite nice and quite welcome. But also, behind the scenes, it's also Apple's way to kind of extend, embrace, and stick the knife into Google.
Yes, very much so. Is it going to do much to impress people to bring them over to Apple if they weren't there before? Is there anything in there that you go, yeah, that's what I've been waiting for? Or are Android users just going to sit back and laugh at the features they've had for 5 years?
Look, it depends on the Android user, I guess. The hardcore on either side is not likely to switch.
Anywhere. Yeah.
But the people who might have jumped to an Android phone from iOS might jump back, for example, on the keyboard thing. I know a lot of people who are very, very keen on swipe and cited as a reason why they wouldn't jump back to iOS. Well, that's now kind of removed. The interesting thing with iCloud Drive, whilst it's not a unique feature, is that they have said, yeah, this is also going to work on Windows PCs. So there's a bit of an extend and embrace there. There's also a few kind of wacky features. The fact that you can now set up and pair your iPhone with your iMac means that, technically speaking, they kind of introduced a 27-inch iPhone.
Oh, okay. When you say pair, you mean screen mirroring, but the other way, so you can now see your iPad on your Mac rather
it's than... more, that's been not so much in that case, more that you can use your iMac to answer phone calls.
Oh, that tethering, so your iMac's basically like a
big speakerphone, basically.
A big speakerphone. That's the phrase I was looking for. A big speakerphone.
I wouldn't particularly suggest that anyone, walk down the street with a 27-inch iMac held up to the side of their head.
I'm going into the tunnel. You're breaking up. I'm going into the tunnel.
Frankly, the battery life is just going to be atrocious.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting move. They've also said that they're going to shift. They announced new software both for developer. There's a completely new development platform, which is of great interest to developers, and I'm not a developer. But they've also introduced HealthKit and HomeKit. These are software packages basically for health tracking and biometrics, and for home automation, so dimming your lights and turning the heater on.
That's the one that really interested me, the home automation one, because they're up against, like, Google's bought Nest, which is the smart home thermostat. So
again,
they've obviously
stick the knife into Google. This is the subtext of a lot of this.
Google's obviously got bigger ambitions in that home automation space, and there was a lot about that at CES this year, and it's been the next big thing for a couple of years. But now that big players like Google and Apple are getting into it, it's probably going to happen. Was there anything? But they haven't announced any partnerships or anything. They're putting the infrastructure in place, the underlying stuff, but no big ticket, hey, look what you can do stuff yet.
They didn't announce any partners. They did name drop a few devices, like the Philips Hue light globes, for example.
Yeah.
What's interesting there is there was no hardware announcement from Apple this time around. And that included things like an iWatch, and you might think, well, health tracking, that's probably going to be an iWatch or a fitness bracelet. And they've got a few patents there. And for the home stuff, they could get into that market. They don't seem to be. Now, what's going to be really interesting here is whether or not they're going to see how it runs for 6 to 12 months, see how their partners pick up, and then come out with the iLight switch and, the iThermostat and all these kind of things. Or if they're quite happy to just say, look, all this stuff's there, but we want it running on our standard. We want your interactive home stuff to have a little design for iOS label, which you'll pay us a bit of money for.
That's very Apple. Yeah, that's a very Apple way of going about it. Imagine what they could have done if they took the $3 billion that they handed over to Dr. Dre and put it into this stuff instead.
Well, I mean, the scary thing is $3 billion is the biggest acquisition Apple's ever made, but it's still only a tiny fraction of their war chest. They could do that. They could quite easily just say, $3 billion, fine, here's an iWatch.
Yeah. So, Alex, there's obviously a lot to get excited about here, but do we have any losers in the announcements?
Well, we've got a couple. I mean, from the Mac side, not too many. If you can run Mavericks, there doesn't seem to be a reason you wouldn't be able to run Yosemite. They don't seem to have made major classes of older Macs.
So no one's really going to get left behind there?
Not that weren't already left behind, as far as I can see.
Yeah.
the story is not quite so pretty on the iOS side, and this is quite predictable. This happens when they do major number releases for iOS. Specifically, the iPhone 4 will not see iOS 8. You've got to have at least a 4S to be running it, and if history is any guide, the 4S is going to look like it's running iOS 8, but there's going to be a whole raft of features that just don't quite make the jump.
Yeah, it's going to run like a three-legged dog on Valiant, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, having said that, the iPhone 4 isn't automatically obsolete in the same way that, for example, I know a lot of people who still run a first-generation iPad and find that a lot of the apps still being produced still work for it. It's only once developers start putting some of the new features in that it starts mandating, right, this must be, this class of device that can run iOS 8.
Yeah.
So the iPhone 4, there's still a bit of life left in it, but undeniably, if you were looking to sell one second-hand, the price has probably dropped just a little bit.
Well, if you're a power user, you probably would have gone higher than the iPhone 4 by now anyway. But if you've been happy with the iPhone 4 up until now, just to do your basic sort of tasks and nothing too intensive, then it might not bother you so much to miss out on iOS 8 and just keep doing what you were doing.
Indeed, yeah, and I mean, as I said before, the 4S users might find themselves happier staying on iOS 7 for the time being.
Yeah, absolutely. At least for the thing that Apple's done in the past is as soon as there's an update, it seems to kill the battery life and a few features are broken on the old models, and it takes at least one or two Actually, it takes a little while for Apple to admit there's even a problem. Once they admit there's a problem, it then takes usually at least one or two updates before they get it right. So if you do have a 4S and it's a mission critical device, you can't afford for it to be running like a dog for a week or two, do not upgrade the day that it comes out.
This is quite standard advice, really.
But
if
people don't always take it.
Mission critical device.
Anything.
Don't go for the first version of a new software, and I mean that's not just Mac. That's Windows. That's new Linuxes, whatever you like. The first version is always kind of the sucker play. Although interestingly, while developers can get hold of Yosemite and iOS 8 from now, Apple's also announced it's actually opening up Yosemite to a limited number of public testers for public beta testing. But again, you're running beta software, you have to accept, hey, this stuff's going to be a bit crashy there. Even when it's fresh and new, they will have ironed out the worst of the major bugs. There's bound to be a few little ones here and there.
Yeah, and it would be fairly difficult to roll back, I would assume.
Probably fairly difficult. I mean, I suppose, look, we'll find out. Apple's said that both iOS 8 and OS 10 Yosemite are due out in spring, and spring obviously, runs for a couple of months. So they've got a bit of wriggle room as to when we'll actually see those released. Well, that just about wraps it up for another episode of Vertical Hold. I'm off to eBay to see how much I can get for Adam's antique rare iPhone 4.
Not the Kingswood!